as it's not to obtain. Jimmy Haslam claimed that Shedeur's drafting had nothing to do with him. It was all Andrew Berry, he claimed. The person who called, Andrew Berry, is on him. All right, that is what we are going to ride, correct? We were going to place it on Andrew Berry, who so far appears to have made a very excellent forecast and call, if he did make that call as Jimmy Haslam claimed, to get Shedeur Sanders in the 5th round. Then it's all about it. In response to a question from fans, he hinted that Shedeur had been critical of the Browns fan base. People are crazy. Kelsey's messing, I said. After Shedeur Sanders' debut, mom on the Browns quarterback position competition? Dude, we'll see. We should see what he said on USA Today. Now let's get started. Let me check. As we all know, Shedeur Sanders, Georgia, is a fierce preseason opponent. On this, get his stuff set. Kevin Stefanski did not immediately clarify whether Sanders' impressive performance would help the 23-yard rookie advance up Cleveland's crowded quarterback depth chart. Actually, our only goal is to help our players grow. We're in assessment mode when questioned about the post-game news conference and the bronze competition. Although I'm happy with the boys' current position, I'm not getting involved in the quarterback competition just yet. Man, in this case, however, it appears that Andrew Berry was content. Just everything that's happening with that dude behind the scenes. I simply want to know who is truly supporting them, who is just putting on a front, and who I can trust and who I can rock with. Therefore, it will be fascinating to observe how this entire issue develops over the course of next week.
It's wild how one preseason game can flip an entire NFL franchise upside down. For months, the Cleveland Browns quarterback situation looked neat, predictable, almost boring. Deshaun Watson was the starter, Joe Flacco and the other vets were there for depth. And the rookies? Well, they were supposed to learn, hold clipboards, maybe throw a pass or two in garbage time. That was the story everyone believed. Clean, simple, safe. Then Shedeur Sanders laced up for his first NFL preseason action, and suddenly, none of that mattered. He didn't just step onto the field, he ripped the script to shreds. One rookie, one performance, and the tidy narrative of the Browns' QB room was thrown into chaos. Fans, coaches, and even executives who thought they had everything figured out were forced to pause, reassess, and ask themselves, did we just stumble onto something extraordinary? Andrew Berry, the Browns' general manager, knew this moment was coming, at least in theory. While the rest of the league was skeptical about the 5th-round pick, Berry had seen what others didn't. Sanders' poise, his decision-making, his ability to read defenses before the snap, but no one expected it to happen this fast. And if you think preseason games are meaningless, think again this one would ripple through Berea, the locker room, and the front office in ways nobody saw coming. The question now wasn't whether Sanders could play, it was whether the Browns, and everyone tied to this franchise, could adapt fast enough to handle the chaos he was about to unleash. And that's where the real story begins. When the Browns selected Shedeur Sanders in the 5th round, reactions were far from ecstatic. The pick raised eyebrows across the league. Some critics called it a PR stunt, a flashy nod to a famous name rather than a calculated football decision. Inside Cleveland, the whispers were louder. Scouts questioned whether Andrew Berry had wasted a precious draft spot on a developmental quarterback, someone who might sit quietly for years while the team's more pressing needs went unmet. In the war room, the air wasn't celebratory, it was tense. Analysts say it looked more like a high-stakes board meeting than a victory party, and that unease wasn't limited to the staff. Jimmy Haslam, the Browns' owner, made it clear in his post-draft press conference that the pick was Berry's alone. That decision's on him, he said, distancing himself publicly. The subtext was clear. If this flopped, the finger would point to Berry. For months, the consensus was simple. Sanders would be at the bottom of the depth chart. 5th-round rookies don't usually stroll into the NFL and demand a starting role. He was expected to take scout team reps, learn behind the veterans, and maybe, just maybe, see a few real snaps down the line. Development, patience, and preparation, that was the plan. Yet, Berry had spotted something others missed. He saw beyond the college stats, beyond the hype, and even beyond the obvious flash of talent. He saw a quarterback who read defenses with the maturity of a seasoned pro, who could dissect complex schemes and react before the play even developed. He saw mechanics so clean they minimized mistakes, a mind so sharp it anticipated blitzes and coverage rotations. He saw a leader, a player who could command a huddle with quiet confidence and rally a locker room without a single word of braggadocio. And perhaps most importantly, Barry saw someone who could handle the spotlight. In today's NFL, visibility isn't just a bonus, it's nearly as valuable as production on the field. Sanders had charisma, a media-ready presence, and the kind of focus that could turn his name into a brand. Barry wasn't just thinking about the next snap, he was thinking about the long game, the franchise, building potential that comes with a quarterback who can perform and market himself at the highest level. Still, the doubts persisted. From reporters to coaching staff, the narrative was cautious, skeptical, and sometimes outright dismissive. A fifth-round rookie, they said, can't just waltz into a quarterback room dominated by established veterans. He can't command respect in the huddle, read defenses like a professional, or handle the pressure of an NFL stadium on a Friday night. Expectations were low, and that low bar set the stage for something spectacular. Because the lower the expectations, the bigger the shock when reality doesn't just meet them, it smashes through them. And then came the day that changed everything. When Sanders first stepped onto the preseason field, the quiet doubts didn't just evaporate, they ignited. A rookie who was supposed to sit, watch, and learn suddenly performed like he'd been leading NFL offenses for years. Poise, decision-making, accuracy, and confidence all in a 60-minute showcase that left fans, media, and front office staff scrambling to adjust. Andrew Barry's gamble, once doubted, began to look like a stroke of brilliance. The fifth-round rookie was no longer a future prospect. He was a present phenomenon. It was more than a debut, it was a statement. And in the months that followed, that one statement would grow into a narrative that shook the Browns' quarterback room, rewrote expectations, and forced a franchise to confront a question they hadn't anticipated. What do you do when the kid you drafted as a gamble becomes the leader your team can't ignore? When Shedeur Sanders finally took the field for his first preseason snaps, the Browns' neatly ordered quarterback narrative unraveled in real time. From the very first throw, it was clear this was not the jittery, inexperienced rookie many had expected. Poise radiated from his every movement. The huddle felt different when he was in command. Players looked to him with a confidence that wasn't just earned in a single game, but somehow carried the weight of experience. He wasn't forcing throws, panicking under pressure, or relying on luck. Every decision, every read, every release had precision, purpose, and timing. The stats from that game didn't just impress, they demanded attention. 2 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, a passer rating north of 106.8. Numbers like these don't just make coaches nod approvingly, they make them rethink everything. They make general managers quietly smile, knowing the gamble they took might already be paying dividends. Andrew Barry, who had endured months of skepticism for selecting Sanders in the 5th round, suddenly looked like he had been playing chess while everyone else was playing checkers. He'd seen the potential in college tape, in Sanders' mechanics, and in his cerebral approach to the game, but no one outside Berea could have predicted how quickly it would translate to NFL action. Then there was Kevin Stefanski, the head coach, who had spent weeks carefully navigating media narratives and protecting his veterans. After Sanders' debut, he didn't erupt with praise. Instead, he delivered the classic coach speak. He did some good things, plenty to clean up. We'll review the tape. On the surface, it seemed neutral, almost cautious. But insiders know how to read between the lines. Stefanski wasn't blowing smoke, he was managing the narrative. Praise could spark a quarterback controversy too early. And yet, even his measured words hinted at an acknowledgement. Something special had just happened and the rookie had earned it. The ripple effects didn't stop on the field. Around Berea, whispers began circulating. Veterans noticed his timing, his quick reads, his uncanny ability to protect the football. One player commented on how Sanders dissected a defensive alignment mid-play, adjusting protection calls and audibles like he'd been in the league for years. Another mentioned how effortlessly he executed tight window throws under pressure. These weren't isolated compliments, they were small endorsements that, piece by piece, built a wave of locker room momentum. When the team notices that a rookie has instincts beyond his years, respect grows organically, quietly, and powerfully. Meanwhile, the fans and media were split. Some insisted it was just preseason, arguing that defenses weren't firing at full intensity and that the stats were inflated. Others couldn't ignore what they'd seen, a player who seemed to operate on a different level than anyone expected. Social media buzzed. Analysts dissected every throw. Casual viewers began following highlights, and every snap Sanders took seemed to spark new speculation about his future. The preseason game that was supposed to be low stakes suddenly became a proving ground that challenged everything the Browns had assumed about their quarterback room. And then there was the subtle genius behind it all, Andrew Berry. While everyone else reacted to Sanders' debut, Berry quietly observed. Every throw, every huddle command, every calculated move by the rookie became a validation of his judgment. He hadn't just drafted talent, he had identified someone with the rare combination of skill, football IQ, and leadership presence that could change the trajectory of a franchise. Sanders' performance wasn't a fluke, and Berry knew it. By the end of that night, one thing was clear. The rookie wasn't just making a case for future snaps. He had ignited a shift, setting in motion a quarterback story that would dominate Cleveland for months to come. What no one knew yet was just how far Sanders' debut would send shockwaves through the locker room, the coaching staff, and the entire NFL landscape. The chaos had begun, and it was only getting started. After that explosive preseason debut, the locker room dynamics began to shift in ways few could have predicted. Shedeur Sanders wasn't just another rookie anymore. He was the topic of quiet conversations, sideline nods, and subtle glances of approval. Veterans who had spent years navigating the NFL's hierarchy began noticing a unique combination in the fifth rounder: precision, confidence, and a football IQ that seemed far beyond his years. He wasn't loud or brash, he didn't demand respect. Instead, he earned it quietly, subtly, in ways that resonated with every position group on the roster. Dillon Gabriel, originally pegged as the developmental rookie in the room, suddenly found himself in unfamiliar territory. Sanders' ability to read defenses, anticipate blitzes, and make quick, smart decisions allowed him to leapfrog not just Gabriel, but also challenge the position of Joe Flacco, and indirectly, even Deshaun Watson. Flacco, the seasoned veteran, wasn't threatened outwardly, but those in the locker room could sense the shift. His advice became measured, almost cautious, a subtle acknowledgement that Sanders was moving into a space Flacco had long occupied. Watson, meanwhile, suddenly faced pressure he hadn't anticipated. A rookie with a fifth-round pedigree was turning heads and forcing whispers about a potential starting change. It wasn't just about stats or physical talent. Sanders' presence changed the culture of the QB room. He made reads quickly, communicated effectively, and, perhaps most importantly, took care of the football. Turnovers are unforgiving in today's NFL, and Sanders' ability to protect the ball while pushing the tempo earned instant credibility. Coaches noticed it in practice reps, teammates noticed it in drills. Even players outside the offensive unit started gravitating toward him, intrigued by the way he dissected coverage, anticipated defensive rotations, and communicated clearly on every snap. Small gestures revealed the growing respect. Receivers like Amari Cooper stayed late after practice, running extra routes, fine-tuning timing and chemistry. Offensive linemen volunteered to go over protection calls, and even defensive backs occasionally offered insights into disguising coverages, helping Sanders read the game faster. It wasn't mandated, it was voluntary. When veterans invest time in a rookie like this, it's not just respect, it's belief. And belief spreads quickly in an NFL locker room. Meanwhile, Andrew Berry watched from the front office with quiet satisfaction. Every small endorsement, every subtle nod of approval in practice was proof that his fifth-round gamble was more than just a lottery pick. It was a calculated risk, and now it was paying off. The rookie wasn't just surviving the NFL environment, he was thriving, and the ripple effects extended far beyond practice sessions. The locker room momentum was building, and with it, the pressure on the coaching staff to reassess their depth chart and consider how to best harness Sanders' emerging talent. The fans and media started noticing too. Preseason hype morphed into heated debate. Analysts dissected his footwork, his decision-making, his uncanny ability to anticipate plays. Social media lit up with clips of precise throws, intelligent reads, and moments where Sanders seemed to see the field in slow motion. Questions started to circulate. Could this fifth-round rookie really compete for the starting job? Could he become the player everyone assumed would take years to develop? The most fascinating aspect was how quietly it all happened. There was no dramatic showdown, no loud locker room confrontation. Change came in small moments. A quarterback glance, a sideline nod, a receiver running an extra route. Those little moments built momentum, reshaping the hierarchy from within. By the time training camp closed, Shedeur Sanders wasn't just a rookie on the roster, he was a legitimate contender, a player who had shifted the narrative without saying a word, simply by excelling at what he did best. And the ripple effects were only beginning to show. The regular season opened as expected. Deshaun Watson at quarterback, Shedeur Sanders watching from the sideline. The veteran-led plan seemed intact, a smooth continuation of the preseason hierarchy. But football is never that simple. Week by week, Sanders' presence in practice, his film study, and the whispers around Berea began to shift the conversation. Coaches noticed his timing, his anticipation, and how quickly he processed defensive looks. Veterans noticed the ease with which he executed plays and communicated adjustments. And the fans? They were starting to catch on that something unusual was happening in Cleveland. The first real test came in Week 3 on the road against the Titans. Cleveland's offense had struggled all game, 3 drives, 3 punts. Watson took a shot to the ribs on a scramble and had to sit out for a series. Enter Sanders. The moment he stepped onto the field, the energy changed. On his first snap, he took the shotgun, scanned the defense, and dropped a perfectly timed 22-yard pass to Amari Cooper. It wasn't flashy, it was precise, calculated, and delivered with poise. The next play, a play-action rollout, found Nick Njoku for another gain. Suddenly, a previously stagnant offense was moving with speed, purpose, and confidence. Sanders wasn't just a relief option, he was a spark, a quarterback who could turn the tide in real time. The drive stalled at the red zone, but that didn't matter. The message was clear: Sanders could handle NFL defenses under pressure. The rookie's ability to read coverages, hit receivers in stride, and avoid turnovers instantly changed the perception of Cleveland's quarterback room. Dillon Gabriel remained the developmental prospect. Joe Flacco was the veteran backup, and Watson, the presumed starter, was suddenly under a spotlight he hadn't expected to feel this early. Sanders' performance didn't just disrupt the stat sheet, it disrupted the hierarchy, quietly but unmistakably. Andrew Berry, ever the strategist, had anticipated this moment. He had drafted Sanders knowing his rookie would be ready when opportunity struck. And now, with a live fire test under NFL conditions, the front office could see the payoff of that calculated risk. Without any public fanfare, Berry began quietly adjusting the team's approach. Offensive packages were tweaked to include Sanders' strengths, quick reads, RPO concepts, deep sideline shots, and designed rollouts that allowed him to threaten defenses both with his arm and his legs. It wasn't about sidelining Watson. It was about forcing the coaching staff to account for Sanders in every game plan, every snap, every defensive adjustment. The locker room responded immediately. Receivers stayed after practice, running extra red zone reps. Linemen and even defensive players pulled Sanders aside, helping him recognize coverage disguises and teaching him to anticipate pre-snap rotations. The rookie wasn't just earning respect, he was earning investment. When a team sees that kind of cross-unit engagement, it's no longer curiosity, it's belief. And belief spreads faster than any narrative a coach can script or any preseason hype can create. By the end of the first few weeks, the ripple effect was undeniable. Sanders wasn't just the rookie with potential, he was a player forcing everyone in the organization to confront a new reality. The coaching staff had to balance loyalty, experience, and results. The veterans had to respect what they couldn't deny. And the fans? They were witnessing a quarterback story unfold in real time, one that was rewriting expectations and setting the stage for a season no one would forget. The real question was no longer whether Sanders could play. It was whether the Browns and their leadership had the courage to let him lead when the stakes were highest. The chaos that started with a preseason game was only intensifying, and every snap Sanders took was a reminder. NFL narratives don't survive first impressions, they evolve with them. By mid-season, the ripples Sanders created in the Browns' quarterback room had become a full-blown wave. What started as quiet admiration and cautious curiosity had transformed into undeniable momentum. The rookie's practice tape was cleaner, his reads faster, and his anticipation sharper than anyone in the room could have predicted. Every throw, every audible, every command in the huddle was a subtle reminder. He wasn't just a backup. He was a player who demanded attention, respect, and opportunity. Week 9 brought the first real pressure cooker. A home game against the Ravens, a division rival with playoff implications. Cleveland's offense stumbled out of the gate. Watson threw 2 early interceptions, and the Browns found themselves down 17-6 at halftime. Behind the scenes, Andrew Berry in the GM box knew exactly what was coming. He had been tracking Sanders' growth all season, noting every throw, every huddle adjustment, every endorsement from teammates. The moment he had been waiting for arrived as the second half began. Sanders was in the huddle. The stadium erupted, and so did the Browns' offense. Sanders led a touchdown drive on his first series, capping it with a 34-yard strike to Peoples-Jones down the sideline. He followed that with a 10-play march ending in a Nick Chubb plunge. The momentum swung so quickly that the Ravens couldn't find their footing. By the final whistle, Cleveland had won 27-23. It wasn't just a victory, it was a statement. The game ball went to Sanders. Watson clapped along, but the rookie had shifted the narrative. He wasn't just a temporary fill-in. He was a legitimate leader. Behind closed doors, the coaching challenge intensified. Kevin Stefanski had to reconcile loyalty to the preseason plan with the reality on the field. Publicly, he insisted, "We'll evaluate everything this week." Privately, pressure mounted from Barry, from position coaches, and from whispers around the locker room. Coaches don't like changing quarterbacks mid-season unless forced, but this wasn't a choice. It was a necessity. Sanders' performance made benching him look like playing scared, a decision the Browns couldn't afford. The locker room vote was quieter but equally decisive. Receivers stayed after practice for extra reps. Linemen and even defensive backs pulled him aside, teaching him nuances of protection calls and coverage disguises. When veterans invest that kind of time in a rookie, it's not just respect, it's belief. That belief was contagious, spreading through the team faster than any stat sheet could measure. Sanders wasn't just participating in the culture, he was shaping it. Meanwhile, Barry's calculated patience paid off spectacularly. He hadn't needed to make headlines to validate his draft choice. The league did it for him. Analysts debated the rookie's performance, fans debated every throw, and commentators couldn't ignore what was happening in Berea. The fifth-round pick, who some had dismissed as a developmental gamble, had become the centerpiece of Cleveland's offense, the linchpin around which the team's fortunes were now tied. By this point, the narrative had shifted completely. Dillon Gabriel remained the developmental prospect. Flacco was the veteran backup. Watson, talented as he was facing the uncomfortable reality that a rookie had outperformed expectations and captured the locker room's confidence. Sanders' emergence wasn't a fluke, it was a pattern, and the front office, coaching staff, and players all had to adapt. The mid-season breakthrough wasn't just a statistical anomaly, it was a cultural takeover. Sanders had claimed the quarterback room, the attention of coaches, and the admiration of teammates. He had rewritten the team's internal dynamics without confrontation, simply through performance and poise. And as the Browns looked toward the second half of the season, one thing was clear. The rookie wasn't just the future of the franchise, he was the present, and anyone who underestimated him was already playing catch-up. As Sanders cemented himself on the field, his impact off it began to explode in ways the Browns hadn't fully anticipated. Jersey sales skyrocketed, social media buzz went through the roof, and national outlets clamored for interviews. Every throw, every highlight, every clutch drive became a talking point, not just for fans, but for the league itself. Sanders wasn't just a quarterback, he was a brand in motion, a marketable force whose presence amplified the Browns' visibility and excitement. Home games transformed overnight. Fans arrived early, pressed against the rails to watch him warm up, eager to catch glimpses of the young quarterback who had turned preseason whispers into full-blown legend. Andrew Barry had foreseen this. He didn't just draft Sanders for his arm or his poise, he had recognized the charisma, the media savvy, and the leadership qualities that would allow Sanders to become a franchise face in every sense. And now, as the regular season wore on, the payoff was undeniable. Marketing departments scrambled to pivot, producing hype videos, social media campaigns, and in-stadium content that highlighted Sanders' swagger and calm execution. Even rival teams took notice. Comments from opposing players praised the rookie's composure and instinct, reinforcing the narrative. Cleveland had stumbled onto something rare. On the field, the results were just as remarkable. By December, the Browns were firmly in playoff contention, and Sanders' stats reflected a player operating at an elite level. He went 5-1 as a starter with only a single multi-turnover game against a top-5 defense. His deep ball accuracy was lethal, third-down efficiency among the best in the league, and his command during 2-minute drills had become legendary. In Week 15 against the Steelers, tied at 17 with just over 2 minutes left on the clock, Sanders orchestrated a 68-yard drive in 6 plays, perfectly setting up the game-winning field goal. There was no panic, no wasted timeouts, no dangerous throws, just surgical execution under pressure. The Browns' playoff berth confirmed what everyone had begun to see. Sanders wasn't just a rookie with potential, he was a game changer. Wildcard weekend brought a showdown against the Bills in frigid conditions. Sanders threw for 292 yards and 2 touchdowns, nearly leading Cleveland to an improbable win. Though the team fell short by 4 points, there was no doubt left about the rookie's capability. Analysts, fans, and even rival quarterbacks acknowledged his talent, fearlessness, and leadership. He had become a cornerstone for the franchise, a player who could carry a team deep into January. Behind the scenes, the organizational power dynamics shifted just as much as the on-field success. Andrew Berry was no longer seen as the GM who had taken a risky 5th-round gamble. He was the architect who had uncovered a franchise quarterback hiding in plain sight. Kevin Stefanski, once cautious and protective of the veteran-led depth chart, adapted to the reality Sanders created. The coaching staff began to maximize his skills rather than merely protect the roster's hierarchy. Even Jimmy Haslam, who had initially distanced himself from the Sanders pick, now touted it as a decisive organizational win. By the end of the season, Shedeur Sanders had gone from an afterthought to the face of the franchise. The Browns building in Berea was buzzing with a new energy. Exit meetings, contract discussions, and off-season planning revolved around one central question: how to continue building around Sanders. The rookie's influence extended beyond the field, shaping the team's culture, marketability, and competitive trajectory. From preseason underdog to playoff hero, Sanders' rise was a story of timing, talent, and calculated risk paying off. He had shifted the narrative in Cleveland in under a year, and the season's end was just the beginning. Every pass, every highlight, every strategic decision now carried the weight of a young quarterback who had redefined the Browns' identity on the field, in the locker room, and in the hearts of fans everywhere. By year 2, Shedeur Sanders had transformed from a rookie sensation into the undisputed face of the Browns. Preseason and early season reps confirmed his poise, accuracy, and football IQ, earning full buy-in from veterans and coaches alike. Andrew Berry's gamble had paid off, as Sanders not only led on the field but also drove brand growth, fan engagement, and media attention. The locker room revolved around his leadership, and Kevin Stefanski adapted the offense to his strengths. By the end of the season, Sanders wasn't just a talented quarterback, he was the foundation of the franchise, rewriting Cleveland's narrative for years to come.